Hi everyone, let's start with our math lesson today. Today we're going to talk about decimals, rounding, division, and how that all kind of goes together. So we're on page 279 through 282, so we're going to cover 4 pages today. But since you're watching the video, I'm going to give you a treat. You don't have to do everything. If you were smart enough to watch my video, you only have to do part of the work. You only have to do the work on these 2 pages. And the only problems you have to do are 3, 4, 8, 9, and 10. And instead of giving this at the end of the video, I actually gave it to you at the beginning. So next time I do something like that, I'm going to give it at the end. But if you're watching, if the ones that are watching my video, they don't get the secret. They don't get the treat. So I'll repeat again what problems you're going to do at the end. Alright. So, I'm going to start off on page 279 and rounding off decimals. You already should know about rounding. We've talked about rounding, even when it was just regular numbers. It's the same thing with decimals. Remember, if it's less than 5, the number stays the same. It doesn't change. It just stays. Remember, if it's more than 5, you're going to move it on up. Move it up 1. So if it's less than 5, you're going to stay the same. You're not going to do nothing. You're going to stop. Okay? And then if it's more than 5, you're going to move it on up. Move it up 1. Okay? You remember in class when I'd have you say stop if it was less than 5? So that's all we're doing today is we're going to round to the nearest 10th and the nearest 100th. Then we're going to go and dividing with it. So if you look at 1A on page 279. On page 279 says 0.47, and this is the number we're rounding. Is it going to go up or down? Well, this number 7 is going to tell us what's going to happen with 4. Well, 7 is more than 5, so 4 is going to go up 1, and it will be decimal 5. Because you're only rounding to the 10th place, and you don't have to put a 0. Okay, also now look at 1B. And it was 1.62. This is the number we're rounding. This number tells us if what we're gonna round it to. So the 2 is less than 5, so that 6 is going to stop and stay the same. So our answer would be 1.6 because it said round to the nearest 10th. Remember when you did your decimals, what was behind the decimal was the tenths, the hundredths, and then it was the thousandths. Remember? Tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. That was after the decimal. So if you're only rounding to the 10th place, you only need 1 number behind that decimal. Okay, if you look at number 2, that's to the nearest 100th. So now we're going to the nearest 100th. So if you look at number 2, it says 2, let's look at 2A, and it says 0.5. 829. This is the number we're rounding. The 9's going to tell us if we're going to stop and say the same or go up. So we're going to keep our 8. Let's look at the 2, the 9. It's definitely more than 5. It's going to tell that 2 to go up 1 and become a 3. So your answer would be decimal 8 3/100. It said the hundredths place, so you only need a digit up to the hundredths place. You don't need to put a 0 because that would make it the thousandths place. We're in the hundredths place. Okay, let's look at 2C. Okay, the 0 is in the hundredths place. The 0 is going to be rounded. The 5 is going to tell us to go up or down. Well, when it's 5, are you going to go down or say the same? Or are you going to move it up 1? You're going to move it up 1. So it'd be 1.21. And then I want us to look at 2F. It says 2.499. Well, we know 9 is 5 or more, and it's going to tell that 9 to go to a 10. Well, 10 cannot go right there. So we move the 1 here, and the 0 will stay there. 1 plus 4, now this number is going to become a 5, the 9 is going to become a 0. So your number will be 2.500. So, because you have to have a number in the hundredths place, because you're narrowing to the nearest hundredth. So that's rounding decimals is just like when you were rounding numbers without decimals. Nothing changed. It's still the same. You're just adding the decimal, and you're either doing the tenths place or the hundredths place. Okay, now I want you to look at page 281 in your book, Division with Rounding Off. Okay, so we're on page 281 in that trusty math book of yours that I know some of you probably would love to get rid of. Alright, division with rounding off. Let's look at the yellow box at the top, or the beige box, khaki, whatever color you want to call it. Fact. Often division will not terminate divide out evenly, no matter how many zeros are annexed. Last math lesson, remember, we talked about adding a decimal and adding zeros when we were dividing. Well, sometimes the number is not always going to pan out. In this case, divide to one decimal place more than the needed decimal places and round off. So it gives you some examples. The first one wants you to find the quotient, the answer to the nearest tenth. So if it says 7, so 7 divided by 32, but it wants your answer around to the nearest tenth. So you already know that you're going to have a decimal. And just like when we added zeros for annexing, we're going to still have to do that. So how many times would 7 go into 32? Think about it. It would go 4 times. 4 times 7 is 28. Add your 0 for the annexing. How many times will 7 go into 40? will be 5. That's 35. 10 minus 5 is 5. Now, yes, we've gone to the 10th place, but it says when you're dividing and you're rounding to the nearest 10th, you also need to go to the 100th place with your decimals, because right now we can't round that 5 up because we don't have nothing beside it. So we don't know if that 5 is going to stay the same or we're going to round it up 1. So we have to go all the way to the 100th place. So how many times will 7 go into 50? Think about it. What's 7 times 7? It's 49. That's the closest you're going to get. And 10 minus 9 is 1. Now, let's look at our answer. We have 4 decimal 57. We can round to the nearest 10th place now, because that 7 is going to do something with that 5. It's either going to make that 5 stop and stay the same, or it's going to round it up 1. Well, if it's 7, what's it going to do? It's going to have us round up 1. So before your answer would be 4 decimal 6. So when you're dividing and it says round to the nearest 10th, well, you know you're going to put your decimal in there, and you're going to have to annex 2 zeros in there. Add those 2 zeros in, because you have to have a 10th and 100th place. That 100th place is going to let you know how to round that 10th place. Is it going to stay the same or round up? Okay? Okay, let's look at the next example you have. It's the same number. But this time it says find the quotient, the answer to the nearest hundredths. So when it says it wants to go to the nearest hundredths, you know you're going to add your decimal. And since you're going to be dividing to the nearest hundredths, you have to have a number beside that hundredths to round with. So you're going to add zeros or annex zeros to the thousandths place. That way, you're able to round. So then you work your problem out. How many times will 7 go into 32? We already figured that out earlier. And it was 4. 4 times 7 is 28. Okay, 12 minus 8 was 4. Bring down your 0. And then we said it was going to be a 5. 7 times 5 is 35. Ten minus 5 is 5. Bring down your next 0. We said that 7 goes into 57 times because the closest number is 49. Ten minus 9 is 1. Bring down that last 0. How many times will 7 go into 10? 1 time. Okay. So this would be our number that we can round now. We have 4 decimal 571. 7 is the number we're rounding. That 1's going to tell it what? What's 1 going to do? Is 1 going to say stop? Or is it going to say go up? It's going to say stop. So your number will be 4 decimal 57 hundredths. So when you're dividing and it says it wants the number rounded to the nearest 10th, you're going to annex 2 zeros. When you're dividing and it says round to the nearest hundredth, you're going to annex 3 zeros. Let's look at some examples. examples and do together. Once you don't watch my video, you're missing out. Alright, let's look at 3A on page 281. And you are given 6 divided by 25. Okay. Your directions say round off to the nearest tenth. So, it says tenth. So you know you're going to add a decimal. Well, it says round to the nearest tenth. So, when you're rounding to the nearest tenth go to the hundredths place. So you're going to annex 2 zeros to the hundredths place, so you can be able to round. Then, now, we can divide to get our answer so we can round it. So how many times does 6 go into 25? Think about it. 4. 4 times 6 is 24. 5 minus 4 is 1. Bring down that 0. How many times is 6 going to go into 10? That one should be very simple. 1 time. 10 minus 6 is 4. Bring down that 0. Now you have 40. How many times will it go into 40? Think about it. 6. 6 times 6 is 36. 10 minus 6 is 4. Alright, but here's our answer that we can round. 4.16, and it said to the tenths place. So 6 is going to tell that one to stop or go up 1. It's going to tell that one to go up 1. So your final answer would be 4.2. That would be your final answer. Okay? Let's look at 4D. 4D says divide to the nearest hundredth. So 4D says 51 into 8. Am I correct? Yes. 80, no 8. What? Decimal 7. Okay, 8.7. Okay, it said we're going to round to the nearest hundredth place. So, but we only need to add 2 zeros because we already have a number in the tenths place. So, hundredths, thousandths, because we have to have that thousandths place so we can round to the hundredths place. Go ahead and put your decimal at the top. How many times is 51 going to go into 87? It's going to be 1 time. Seven minus 1 is 6. 8 minus 5 is 3. Bring down that 0. So now you have to figure out how many times it can go into 360. Well, if you say 5 times 5, that's 25. 2, that's not going to be enough because it's going to start with a 2. So let's go to 7. Because 7 times 5 is 35. So let's see. 7 times 1 is 7. 7 times 5 is 35. Okay, that's pretty close to that number, isn't it? So now we can subtract. 10 minus 7 is 3. Bring down your 0. Well, we know 51 is bigger than 30. So, we have our number that we can round now. This is the number we're rounding. In the hundredths place, the thousandths place is either going to tell it to stop and stay the same or go up one. It's a 0. 0 is way less than 5. So it's going to tell that 7 to stop and stay the same. So it's going to be decimal 1, 7. So you just have to remember when it says tenths place, hundredths place, how many zeros to annex. Don't forget your decimal. Don't forget your rounding rules. Alright, let's look at one more example, but it's not this, it's something a little different. It's something I think we might have forgotten how to do, because it's been a while since we've done it. So I'm going to review with you. I'm on problem 8A on page 282. And it says 27 feet minus 3 yards equals how many feet? It's been a good while since we've done this. This was way before Christmas. So, we know our answer is in feet. So we have to make sure everything is in feet. Well, this one's in yards, so we need to change it to feet. Well, how many feet are in 1 yard? It is 3. So you're going to say 3 times 3. Because you're going from a bigger unit of measure to a smaller, you're going to multiply. So 3 times 3 is 9 feet. So then you're going to say 27 minus 9. I told you cannot forget those conversion charts. Got to remember them. Then you would do your subtraction. I'll let you work that problem out real quick for yourself. Okay. 17 minus 9 is 8. Bring down your 1. And your answer is 18 feet. Do not forget your temperature, equations. Remember, if you're trying to find Fahrenheit, you're going to use this equation. 9 over 5 times C plus 32. You'll do this part first, then add the 32. If you're trying to find the Celsius, it's going to be 5 over 9 Fahrenheit minus 32. And in this one, you do the subtraction first, then the multiplication. So don't forget your temperature formulas. Alright guys, if you have any questions, please let me know. And I will see you next math lesson. Bye.